Using Carrara with the help of Virtual World Dynamic Cloth and Hair Simulator, this is the scene we're going to create in today's episode. Okay, so the first thing I do is get the character animated, and just so that this dynamic hair isn't constantly trying to calculate itself and simulate, I disable it from view, and that changes that. Okay, so we're going to bring in an Annie block. Once again, I'm starting at the 1 second frame because it's nice to have that extra 30 frames in front to do a little tweaking if we need to before we actually roll the render camera. And we're using a poser mocap motion that makes her run, and she gets to the edge of a pit and she almost loses her balance, so she sits there and tries to maintain her balance. But instead of having her look down the pit like that, we're actually going to change her posture. So I'm going to get rid of the chest and abdomen 2 keys, since there's just the ones at the beginning and the end of the thing. We're not going to lose anything there. And now I'm just going to use pose morph controls to change her posture up, because we're going to put her in a city street scene looking down the street. When she comes to, something's going to startle her. So we got the head angle here. Neat. See what I mean? We're totally changing what's going on here. I have the my actual work that I'm doing in Carrara sped up 500 times right now. Throughout this whole thing, I'll either speed it up or run it at normal play, just to keep this thing from taking way too long. Right now, I'm just tweaking the animation, only using the morph control dials, and boy, she's, see, and we just keep tweaking. And when I'm actually doing a final animation, I spend a lot more time, especially on the facial expressions and but arms and fingers and all of that kind of stuff. We're not going to do that here because that's not the main focus of this tutorial. We just want to get through this part so we can get to the virtual world dynamics cloth and hair simulator. So that's looking pretty darn good right there. And so now I'm going to bring in the J suit from my Carrara library, which I have already turned into a prop, but right now it is in the Artemis Night color scheme that I have. So I'm going to quickly change that to more of a street warrior type of thing to match the Michael 4 coat that we're going to simulate as well. This is a modeled leather shader that I've created, and right now I'm going to use that one and just drag it into this red one to make a black leather shader. And now that I've said that, I'm gonna really speed up through this stuff too, because this isn't part of it either. But I think it's important that you see some of the work that I go through, and see how just by saving a few nice shaders in my browser makes all of this kind of stuff right on the fly so much easier and quicker. And there's my leather maps that I create. I've got just a couple, and then I just multiply them by colors or use them as color gradient drivers, and Yeah, it works out really well. But enough about that. Let's get on to virtual world dynamics, along with Filimo's wonderful bridge to Carrara. So what we do is with we don't have to have anything selected first. We just go File and then go VWD Cloth and Hair. And when it comes up here, first I go ahead and turn on the scene viewer right away. And then I just delete the exchange files so that we don't have any previous information messing with us. But I always like to use this assistant. That really helps me out until I figure out more about the manual. And then I can check the collision distance versus what friction I need. Every cloth that you simulate is going to be slightly different. So tweaking these can make all the difference in the world in your simulation. And that you do on the collider, the collision object. There's our collision object. Now we select the garment or whatever and hit cloth again with the assistant box checked. That's important. And it takes a little calculation. I have the video slowed down a little bit so that I have a little bit extra room to talk. So it's actually a little quicker than this in real time. I'm playing at 70% right now. But now we're using material zones to create selections, and you can create your own material zones for this. But now I'm going to add that as a nailed, so it's nailed to the collision object. And now this one is a little better right here. So now I can add some extensions, which is like a fall off on your nailing. And then these controls go 10, 20, or 30 as presets for your fall off, or you can enter your own values up above. There, that's nailed. And now we need to add the zipper parts to the rigid section, which gets them to follow their neighboring vertices. Perfect for buttons and zippers and things like that. It's not something that makes them stiff, it just makes it so they don't fall off. Now I deselect start. I'll explain why later, but this is why the assistant comes in handy. Is you get these handy little check boxes that automatically configure the simulation according to what choices you have, and I need that. Okay, let's go ahead and get to the simulate part. Right here I have the video cranked up to like 300 times just to get this through quickly, and it is done. So now we're back at normal speed. And the first reason why I like to deselect that start button is so that I can add inflation. And in this case, I'm using an inverse inflate to get it to shrink wrap. And I'm going to add some stretch to it. And this is why I purposely made the J suit smaller than the collision figure. At this point, I just go ahead and start the simulation, which I am going to speed up again, and we are now watching it at 700 times its original speed. It really doesn't take very long to simulate this stuff, depending on how complex the tire is compared to the collision figure and everything. Considering all of this software is doing, I am incredibly impressed at how quickly it can pound through this stuff, even though I'm speeding it up 700 times just to get through it in this tutorial. And as soon as it's done here, we're going to get right here, this is real time, and that's the real-time representation of the simulation as shown in VWD. Now we hit send animation to host, and here we are back in Carrara. And I'm just going to quickly turn the both this suit and the one that's hidden, the original suit, to not collide with hair so I don't forget and have a problem down the road. So now we are going to add Michael Four's Steampunk Cowboy long coat, and I'm going to go ahead and apply one of the preset textures to it. And once again, this is what I did with the J suit. We select Model, Fenric, Unlock Figure. And you're probably sick of me saying this already. And then Animation, Detach Skeleton, and get rid of the hierarchy. Drag it out of the hierarchy and then delete the hierarchy. So, and then I rename it because I'm going to save it to my Carrara library, my browser. And now I'm tweaking out the shaders. You can see I've got it running really fast right here because I just want to get through it. But I figured I'd rather at least show it in super speed than to omit it entirely. It's an important part of the process. You want to get your shaders right. Basically, I added the specular maps and everything. So now, just like what I did to the J suit, I use the universal manipulator, and I'm going to resize the thing. And keep in mind, you don't have to do a completely symmetrical resize. We have some liberty to do some stretching. Like here, I'm going to take it in the z-axis a bit. There we go. VWD does detect the floor, so this wouldn't be a bad thing to hit the floor. You really don't have to be that precise with it for VWD to do a really good job with it. So I originally turned these Age of Armor armbands off, but with the sleeves being that short, I'm turning them back on. Looks cool. Alrighty, so yeah, that's looking pretty darn good. I say we run a sim. Okay, so this time I want to increase the collision distance. For one, I need to get outside of the J suit, and for another, it's a coat, and a leather jacket like that should have a little more distance just because it's a stiffer fabric. Okay, so bring in the coat now, and bring it in. Okay, now let's go ahead and add rigidity to, yeah, those are plates that are attached to the coat. I don't think there'll be a problem with that extra seam in front being part of the rigidity group. We'll add it. Okay, and the collar, rigid, and cuffs, rigid. Now I want to do a custom nail job. The nail is basically putting tighter springs between the cloth and the collision item, the collision object, that attempt as best they can to stay together. That's what nailing is. So I'm holding Alt to deselect those and put a little fall off on there. I think that'll work. Let's go with that. We'll nail that, and let's run a sim. I'm setting the material this time to stiff, which is simulated akin to leather. Okay, now for this one I'm going to turn off inflate. I'm going to pump the gravity up to make it a heavier cloth. At least that's where my mind is at when I do that. I'm still going to give it stretch though. Probably don't need it, but I'm going to do that. Okay, I don't know why. Once in a while it'll turn on the extra calculation measures that I just switched off, but I want to do a nice quick sim, so I went ahead and those belt loops fell off. If that's a problem for you, because they're not already separated out with their own domain, my suggestion would be to do that before you run VWD. Like right now, you could just stop VWD, get out of it, and enter the model room and select the vertices of those loops and give them their own shading domain and call it loops. So then you can select it in VWD here and add it to the rigidity group. Now we're looking at it in real time again. This is the way VWD displays it when it's done, and it looks great. That looks great. We're just going to send this animation back to the host. Boom. And so now this is what it looks like. We'll bring it back to the 1 second mark and scrub it through. And even in this texture preview in the working environment, it looks good. Now I'm going to speed up the video again, because what I do next here is I resize just by looking at the bounding boxes. I'm resizing the collision objects for the hair a little bit bigger to make up for the big coat. It makes it so I don't have to have the hair collide against the coat, because when I've tried doing that before, it just makes a big mess out of the hair. This works nice and quick. So now I set the camera up because I like to be able to see what happens. And now the way I have this speeded up, it's 700 times the recording speed, so it looks pretty real time. And this is the only layer I'm going to show on here that's simulating the hair. We did a drape and we simulated it, and now it's just about done here, and we'll shoot a quick test render, and that's it for the hair part of this segment, because we're going to do a whole show on just dynamic hair, just to show you the workflow without taking a whole lot of time. And this is kind of a beauty pass of what it's going to look like. Pretty sweet. And now I set it up to render in sequenced PNG with alpha, and I give it a specified folder. I name my folders the same name as the PNG clips within. See how I'm saving that and pasting it, and then I save the scene the same way, so that it's all organized. If I ever need to come back and tweak something, it's ready to go. So now we've got a scene that I started building years ago, and I keep building onto it. It's stonemason's urban sprawl, and I've added a bunch of Kofleck Norg's Techno City and steampunk towers, and I've got Winston 1984's elevated subway back there. You can see it zipping by in the distance. Now those cars in there were running the other way, and so I dropped them into a target helper object and Gave them a 90-degree flip, and now they're running perpendicular to where they were. And now I need to get the ant farm's M11 flea into the camera view. So we're going to do the same thing that I did with the cars, except see, you just drop it into a target helper object, and it's still, now it's blocked by the street stuff. But when you drop it into a target helper object like this, you're actually moving the entire animation right along with it. It's a really handy way to be able to you build your scenes, save them, animate them, and just be able to tweak them for your own situation. Uh, as I get the flea going here for us, that looks pretty good. Let's take a look. Good old Carrara. This is one magical piece of software. And see, that is this scene was built on the EnvironKit's base scene. So I've got plenty of atmosphere in there. I put in a bunch of volumetric lighting, and that's why I can't really render Rosie 5 in this scene directly. The volumetric light just doesn't play nicely with her hair. That's looking good. Okay, so now we have 4 seconds of animation, and Rosie's got 3 seconds of animation, so that should work great with each other. We're going to go ahead and set this one up like we did with Rosie's. Sequenced PNG with alpha. We don't need alpha in this one, but we're going to go sequence the a movie file would have been fine. But I'm also putting this in the same subfolder that I saved Rosie's animation images into, just to keep everything organized. Really helpful. But then when I save the scene back, I'll save it in the same location as my Techno City, my urban sprawl Techno City. Okay, now it's time for a batch queue. And so here is the magic. We have this current scene. We'll switch to batch queue here and load in our 2 scenes. Often I'm loading in more than 2 because I'm doing a whole lot of test renders with different camera angles and stuff. Check things out. Just loading in Rosie's here. There we go. Okay, and now after hitting launch, that's when I usually go and check the forums at Daz3D and do a bunch of typing, work on the website, do stuff like that. It's a really handy feature too, because if I do need to use my computer, I can access it, and Carrara will automatically relieve some of its load from the render engine, and that's only when it's in batch queue. And see, now I really had to show you this just because if you look off on the right, I started off averaging 47 seconds per frame rendering Rosie with alpha, and then I turned on the screen cap and it increased to 48 seconds, but just wanted you all to see that. Okay, so now when you first launch DaVinci Resolve, you're greeted with this welcome page with your saved things, your saved projects, and we are going to launch an Untitled project. That's our new one. And you open up on this cut page, and it's a really handy looking thing, but I'm not quite used to it yet, so I still begin my ventures in the edit page. Just easier for me to wrap my head around for now. Let's see, here are the folders with my images in there. There's the city, and this other one's got Rosie in there. Okay, with the alpha. And so all I have to do is grab these two folders and just drag them into the bins, the media pool right there. And if I want, I can assign them to custom bins. It's really quite handy. See, now they reside here in the cut page too, but um, I'm still used to this traditional NLE workflow type of thing. But you double click on that folder and it launches in just like it's a video. And you can see it and you can set in and out points. Really, really nice. And so the one on the left there is for videos that you're going to load in, and the panel on the right will be for what our video output is. Right about, you see, I really want that whole starting part. Yeah, yeah. If I'm going to take anything off, I'm going to take it off the end. I have to get a second off of the city scene. It doesn't matter if you set your out point too soon, you can still change it in the timeline. It doesn't actually clip any of your frames off. It just makes it handier for editing. Okay, now to bring Rosie in, we don't just put her on the timeline like we do with the city scene. For her, we have to composite her over it by entering Fusion. What a magical room. So I'm going to push down on my mouse wheel, and that's how I drag that down. And now I've just drag this down and see how it turns blue on the left. That's when I know that I have it in the flow. There's not in the flow, there's in the flow. Let go of it and it automatically puts what's called a merge node in there. And so that's a quick composite. Now, not that long ago, I'd have looked at that and said, hey, that's fantastic, and I'd have just left it like that. I just really didn't know anything about visual effects or compositing or making films or any of that kind of stuff. I was just having fun making art, learning Carrara, doing my thing. But there's a whole lot we can do with this that I'm still not aware of, but it sure is fun to dabble in here. But let's take a look at how we can spruce things up. Let's make a little room here, and I want to make the background look more vibrant. So I think the easiest way to start with that, it doesn't seem like the thing to do, but I'm going to add a blur to it. I'm going to look for like a soft glow. There it is. And it looks way too much right now, but you got to start somewhere. Over on the right here, we have the adjustments for whatever node we have selected in our pipeline, and we just start tweaking around with the settings there and adding more tools and adjusting them and working back and forth between the foreground and the background to get everything to meld together nicely. So at this point, I'm speeding everything way up so that you can see that I'm adding different things, doing different things, making adjustments, and we're not going to go through this whole lengthy process here, but here I would like to make a note that this is where we would get great advantage by running what's called a multi-pass from your render in Carrara. We can get different outputs that can be used in Fusion to drive effects in certain ways. For example, I can do a render pass of just the volumetric hair. Dynamic hair is a volumetric effect, and we can also make depth pass renders and things like that that can help to apply more filter in one area of the image, and with without actually having to hand draw masks and things like that. But I have actually gone through and done rotoscoping with hand drawn masks in here, and with Fusion it's great. You have feathering controls, and you animate everything. But now I'm going to fade this out into the final result.